Good evening and welcome to episode 276 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Kumalo. It's the Thursday edition of the Private Property Podcast, and if you're joining us for the first time, welcome to it, the only daily property talk show in South Africa that is helping you navigate your property journey. Doesn't matter whether you're a tenant, a landlord looking to buy, to sell, or to build, this is the show that helps you along on your journey. And to all our regular viewers on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, as well as on YouTube, welcome to it. You know how we do. Every single weekday, you and I have an appointment at 7 p.m. where I'm always in conversation with an expert who helps us on our property journey. And of course, I never go alone. I always love talking about the whole host of other shows that we have across the Private Property social media pages. As it is a Thursday, you can catch award-winning farmer Umbali later on this evening at 8 p.m. as she brings you the farming podcast. And of course, she delves into all things agriculture. I was saying to you all, I think it was on Tuesday, that I'm actually going into my own little, home garden where I'm going to start growing my own veggies and potentially a few fruits. So I'll definitely be posting about that journey on my own social media platforms. So you can follow me at Zamatunga_K on Instagram as well as on Twitter. You can also catch that show every Mondays at 8 p.m. And I always want to hear from you and Bali as well about how your journey, whether it's in residential property or of course in agriculture, is going. So do continue sharing with us down here below. And every Wednesdays, you can catch St. Claassen on the First Time Home Buyers Show, which is always in conversation with people who've not only walked that first time home buying journey, but have gone on to grow their property portfolio from strength to strength. So if you want to get tips and insights on how they did it, then that certainly is a show that you want to make sure you tune into. Every Mondays and Fridays, Chad gives us a great insight and certainly a great perspective on certainly what we can expect from some of Joburg's exclusive properties, as he gives us definitely a great preview of those various properties that you can find, of course, on www.privateproperty.co.za. Well, those are some of the great shows that you can catch across our social media platforms. Do, of course, continue engaging us, following us, liking the page. I know that we're celebrating this week the milestone of reaching 50,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So thank you very much for subscribing, for watching, and of course, engaging our content online. Do share with your friends and family the lives, as we always come to you live, as well as the great episodes, so that they too can expand on their property knowledge. Now, talking about expanding on our property knowledge, this evening's conversation is one that I'm very excited about, because it's also something that I do and have been slowly growing in this particular aspect. It's also something that I know that so many of us who've grown up in the township have probably seen this particular gap, but didn't quite know how to go about filling it, especially if you're in the property space. And we will be exploring opportunities in the Kasi property market. We're going to be exploring, what are some of the opportunities? What are some of the creative ways that you can tap into some of the opportunities, some risks that are associated with the Kasi property market, and of course, the overall state of the market. I think one of the big things is before you see what the gaps are in the market, you want to get a great overview of what the space looks like. I want to find out from you at home, if you're a property entrepreneur, a property investor that is in the Kasi property space, share with us a bit about your journey being umastandi eKasi and how you've navigated it. And this doesn't mean you have to have, built those mega, I'll say townhouses or bedrooms that we're seeing, and we'll speak about them shortly. Perhaps you only have a two-room garage that you're renting out. So, Mastandi, share with us your journey in that, some of the highs, the lows, and how you are navigating them. And in the event where you are exploring getting into the Kasi property market, what are some of your reservations about getting into the space? Do share with us down here below. And to help us better understand the Kasi property space, who else would we, of course, chat to either than Nthato Raboshaga? Of course, he is the founder at Nthato Realty. Nthato, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Evening, Zama. Thanks for having me. How are you?
It's always such a pleasure talking property with you. I mean, you and I have the conversation off air, and even after the show off air, we can go on and on and on. So I'm quite excited for the viewers to get a great insight in this particular topic, because I think one of the things that we've certainly seen is that we've seen Wuti in the beginning, we used to probably just have, a back room, and now the quality of the back rooms has slightly changed. Before we even look at some of the opportunities, risks, and whatnot, perhaps first just give us a great overview of the Kasi property market sort of in its entirety.
I think we'll just focus on Gauteng for today. So when we're looking into this market, looking into the stats on its own, we've seen that mostly the properties there are just under 500,000, and this segment is doing quite well in terms of the capital appreciation of the property in itself. So even though you don't consider yourself as a property investor, by virtue of buying a home for your family and living there, within 10 years or 20 years, you will see that the value is going to go up quite tremendously. I have an uncle of mine who bought a house in Cosmo City for around 300,000. This was around 10 years ago. Now it's worth close to 950,000. Others going just over $1 million. And this is a person who does not consider themselves a property investor. They just bought a house, but it's growing quite tremendously because of the way townships are set up. They're densely populated. There's a huge demand for them. There's not enough space. So we know that there's demand and supply. So people want properties. And the lifestyle in the township, as most of us would know, is quite affordable as compared to the suburbs. If you go to the suburbs, your school transport may be around 1,500 a month. In the township, you're probably going to pay 300 rents because that's the standard there. The schools are also a bit cheaper. So you can buy a house that's worth probably 500,000 in the township as compared to someone who bought it in the suburb. Your running costs are going to be significantly lower than someone who bought in the suburbs just by virtue of being in the township. And most of the people who live in the township understand that concept, hence they don't want to move away. So even if you are not looking at yourself as an investor, just by living there and buying a house, trust me, the capital appreciation is coming. By the time to sell, you're good to go. When you're looking into the rental space, there are big shifts happening. The biggest space has been a bedroom, but there's developments coming into that space. The bedrooms are no longer funded mainly by the owners of the houses. There are these companies that are popping up to finance people to build bedrooms in their backyards, simply because they realize that this is a space we are not tapping into. They are realizing what the commercial spaces saw a few years ago. If you remember, back in the days, people used to take taxis to go to the suburbs to buy a grocer, a ShopRite. But now, almost every township has ShopRite near it. And that concept was brought about by a shop that is probably closed down by now. It's called Isco. That's like one of the first companies, the biggest retailers that went into the townships. They did so well. Then the big giants came, they squashed it. Now it's gone, it's obsolete. But now we see malls coming in. You have Tembisa, there are big malls. In Tembisa, I'm sure there are like 4 malls now. They're just building
There are more malls than it needs. If anything, Tembisa has more malls than it needs, but that's a conversation for another story. I mean, for another day,
So now we're looking into the commercial space is also building up bit by bit within the townships. We're looking into the rental space is also changing. Apart from these companies that are financing people to build bedrooms, we're also looking into complexes being built. We're looking into proper dwellings being built for people instead of staying in someone else's backyard. It's something that we do, but topic for another day. But now, because there's this middle class that's emerging and they have no interest in moving to the suburbs, but they want to live comfortably. When they say bedroom, they're moving away from that standard bedroom where they build you one toilet, all of you share it, one shower. Now we're finding places that are being built, bachelor pads, where you have an ensuite, you have your own kitchen, but you are still in the township, but you can be comfortable and live nicely. So that's what we're seeing in the market now. So the township market will not go down anytime soon, if ever, simply because of special planning of how things were done, and people have been living there. They're used to it. There's a certain lifestyle and culture in every township, and the townships that are quite doing well are those that are feeder townships to suburbs, to places of work. For instance, you have Attridgeville as a township in Pretoria. It's a feeder to people who are working in the CBD. You have Mamelodi. It's a feeder to people working in Pretoria East. You have Seshanguve, a feeder working, you understand? So each township that is closest to a place of working, to a particular suburb that has activity, that has malls, that has companies and factories, they seem to be doing quite well than the townships that are far away from places of work. The best example I would give is the Vaal. I wouldn't recommend anyone investing in the Vaal right now. I mean, in the Vaal now, most of the townships, they get electricity at least 2 days in a month. The water has been gone probably for around 2 years now. My mom used to live in the Vaal, but I moved there now back to Joburg because no one can live properly that side. So investing in such a place now, you're going to be in trouble with your tenants. They don't have water, they don't have electricity. They will call you non-stop.
And we'll get to that, because I think those are the risks associated with it. I mean, when I think about Amakasi, as we're saying that we're focusing a lot on Gauteng, certain parts of Soweto were in the dark for months last year when we went into lockdown, and we'd seen various service delivery, I'd say associated protests, or streets being closed off, tires being burnt in those parts because they were complaining about not having electricity for months on end, even though we were in the middle of a global pandemic, and they just had no means of accessing electricity. But before we get to the risks, one of the things that you mentioned, Nthato, which I absolutely love, and it still, I'll say it blows my mind only because I've been looking at the stats for certain townships in particular, around Gauteng on this, is the capital appreciation in certain townships within, whether it's Soweto or the East Rand or the West Rand. When I remember there's a particular area, it's a particular Kasi in Gauteng, I'm not going to mention names, that I had been looking at the ownership, the price points, and realized that a lot of the the majority of the owners that are bought in that particular area had bought, let's say in the past 10, 15, most expensive that had been bought at the time. Currently, same township, same street, literally properties are going for. It's so interesting to have seen that capital appreciation in those areas, especially because a lot of people who are investing in suburbs are talking about how capital appreciation has almost reached its peak. So if you're buying a property, for example, in the suburbs right now, the likelihood of that property appreciating, even in that first, in the first 10 years, is so slim, because it's almost as though it's already peaked. You can buy that apartment in the north of Joburg, or that mansion, or that house. Let's not even say mansion, in the north of Joburg. You're not going to see 10, 20 or more % growth. So there's certainly something to be said about exploring Ekasi as a different type of property that you can potentially either add to your property portfolio if you're not from Ekasi, perhaps you're from rural areas. And we'll probably have a different conversation about the rural areas, because I think that's also an interesting dynamic altogether. But what I think, if anything, Nthato, and I know that you are also looking at some of these stats. I remember earlier this year when I had shared how the most property sales actually had happened in Drizik, in Orange Farm last year. And so that had the biggest volume, or the biggest number actually, of property transactions were in a township, Orange Farm. And it was just, for me, it boggled my mind that, and I know Drizik, I know exactly where it is in Orange Farm. It's obscure, very unassuming. You would never think people are transacting in properties in that particular area, but it was the number one spot, in 2020. So there's definitely something to be said about the township space and what opportunities are currently there. I want us, in touch with them, to get a sense, and you already started touching on this, viewers at home who are interested in getting into the kasi property space, whether being umastandi, who obviously gives better accommodation that as a back room, because as you're saying that we're slowly moving away from that, and the market is not quite there anymore. What are some of the active first steps should they either start taking, or certainly what kind of research needs to go into them trying to explore whether it's building in Ekasi or maybe partnering up with other people in order for them to be able to build?
Yeah, I think what we are actually seeing now, the biggest risk to property investors in the township now, whether it's buying, whether it's building rooms for rental, or you investing for capital appreciation, irrespective of your approach to investing, the biggest risk right now is the land grabs. And unfortunately, the stats do not show that. Unfortunately, lots of the big companies haven't picked that up. But when you look into, we spoke of Dresig now, we're looking into also some parts of Johannesburg.
Protea, yeah, I remember there's that area in Protea where those land grabs happened, and it was bad. I mean, there was plain land, jiggy, within literally a space of 2 months that they had set up. And I know the news had even covered it. So we certainly are seeing quite a lot of that in different townships across, not even just across Gauteng, but certainly across the country.
Definitely. And the people who are doing these land grabs, they are so organized. I've taken up my time to travel to the majority of them from Vaal, Joburg, Pretoria, just to talk to them. They have streets. They have street names. They have water that they are building. The infrastructure is so proper in terms of their spatial planning. They are well organized, and majority of people who move to those places are the backroom dwellers. They live, like for instance, in Attridgeville was part of the best performing places. If you build a bedroom there, people will come begging to get it space there. But now there are rooms that are empty because people have literally moved from the bedroom and they went to a shack with the hope that the money that they were paying per month, they will buy bricks and build their house. So we are seeing a shift in mentality. Mainly, it's among the probably 30, 40-year-olds. This is the generation that wants to own a property. This is the generation that wants to live in a house of their own instead of renting. So there's a shift in mindset, and unfortunately, the state hasn't caught up. The private sector hasn't even caught up as well. So what I would say is, if you're looking to investing and you have the funds, land. Yes, we understand you build and you sell houses, but if you can get land, develop it proper, and just sell it to people to build their own houses, that's a sitting duck. Literally, I've just given you $1 million. I'll send you an invoice. Thank me later. That works. It works proper. Then
that I'm going to interject, because you've given them $1 million, you'll send them an invoice. Except you and I also know, Guti, when we look at, and I want to make Isoweto as a good example. I mean, I'm from Isoweto, so it probably works well that I'm able to make that example. When you look at Isoweto, and I know that there's certainly been different parts of Isoweto that have been, developed. Certain parts of residents in other townships always say that we're the Santon of townships from a holistic perspective. But when you look at Soweto, there are parts of Soweto that I'll say have open land, right? And let's make the assumption that some of that open land you actually can build. I mean, I did an exercise where when I would be driving around Ekasi, and there's a particular piece of land that I would identify that I thought, listen, this would actually be a great place to build because it's close to transport nodes and the malls and what have you, and would then try to figure out, is it buildable? And you find that, okay, in certain parts of certainly Isoweto, that those open land patches, they're not buildable. For different environmental reasons, the structure won't hold. Sometimes it's wetness, yada, yada, yada. Of those that are buildable, and let's assume that there still are some, even though Isoweto, we know geographically, how it's structured. I feel as though you tend to find that land will predominantly belong, let's say, either to the municipality, or in some instances, there's still some private owners who own it and are just holding on to it. And a lot of those private owners are white private owners. They're just holding on to it. They've seen all this development that's occurring around, and they're almost waiting to sell it at a ridiculous price, maybe 10, 15, 20 years from now. I mean, we're seeing something similar when you look at that honeydew strip, your honeydew Ramsach in the West Rand. We've seen quite a lot of that, where lots of patches of land, a couple of hectares, is now being sold because we are seeing the development. So my thing, or the question, certainly for the benefit of the viewers, is when you look at land that's particularly owned by the municipality, how do you go about accessing, we'll say, that state-owned land? Because you'll tend to find that that's where people will say you must have connections, yada, yada, yada. That's one. But secondly, assuming there's no issue of, municipal land or land, you can't build on that particular land, how do you raise the money for the land? And I ask this, Nthato, because you and I both know that typically commercial banks don't grant, high bonds for certainly, buying just a piece of land for you to build your own home. Now, never mind you trying to buy a piece of land and you're still going to develop for millions of rands. How are you going to feasibly actually go about doing that? So you say to us, you've given us $1 million, we must invoice you. I think you need to add these line items before you can justify that invoice.
Okay, it's fine. Yeah, I'll reduce the amount to 1,000. Then it's fine. Yeah. So the access to land, it's a very brilliant question, because we did that. We found land. This was in Pretoria with a company, Wealth Creation Network. We wanted to buy land, develop it, do well. We raised the funds. We had the money, the capital. We then identified land. Then we went to the government special planning office, town planning. And then when you got there, all you need to do is probably get GPS coordinates or get the street address. You get there, they're going to print out maps for you that show the exact land and who owns it. If it's owned by the state, then you go to government offices for human settlements. You get there and then you submit long forms. And you pay tons amounts of money. Like you pay, 100, 150, 200, like small these monies, but eventually they add up to lots of monies. And then eventually, once you're done filling out these forms, you then submit them. After submitting them, we then learned the hard way that you need connections for this land. Simply because after we identified it, did the groundwork and did everything, then submitted, we're then told that we cannot just sell you this land because it's state land, it's municipality land. So we are going to set it out for bidding on a tender process. It went out for bidding on a tender process. Within a week of that bidding, someone was already building there. So literally they just gave it to their friend and they started building, and that's how we lost the land. So on my side, in terms of buying municipal land, literally I've given up. I don't even look at municipal land. I don't have any connections. I don't believe in connections. You must just do things the right way. So we buy privately owned land. There are lots of white people.
Nthato, there's nothing wrong. Nthato, there's nothing wrong with connections. Let's not make it seem like every connection is a sinister connection. You know me, I know you. If I ever need something that's in your line of work, like I've previously done, I've reached out, I've solicited your services, paid for the services. So there's certainly nothing wrong with knowing people, but I know that's not what you meant. So I'm half teasing. I know exactly that is not what you meant. We're slowly running out of time, Nthato. I want to get a sense from you then, how do people go about raising the capital? And this is assuming, obviously, it's not municipal land, because as we're saying, municipal land does have its own goal, as we'd say. And I wanted to ask you that question because I know that there are people who probably have an interest in municipal land. I know that we've seen different municipalities across the country even issuing out, certain properties or assets that they're disposing of. They've been, government companies, so parastatals, SOEs, that are also disposing of some of their assets. And people probably want to get a sense of how that process works. And you're saying it is quite admin intensive. There is a sense of needing to know how the system works, have people there, which obviously is a conversation for another day. But for people who've identified privately owned land, how do they even, approach the owner? So it's not something that's on privateproperty.co.za. You now know that Nthato owns this piece of land. It's just chilling. It's somewhere in Pretoria. How do we approach Nthato to get that piece, to make an offer? And then how do we also then raise the money to be able to pay Nthato for that land?
Yeah. Well, there are different platforms that can be used to get owners' details. I think even private property
Yeah.
has that feature where you can just put in an address and then it will give you their details when they bought it, for how much, their ID number, like crazy, crazy numbers. Like it's so explicit. So you can get that from there. Then you then contact the owner and talk to them. And it will be a bit cheaper contacting the owner directly if you know how to run the numbers, because the owners are quite sneaky as well. They will check you out and then give you a ridiculous number. And if it's a cash sale, it doesn't matter whether you're buying it for 1,000 times the amount. It will go through simply because it's cash. There's no numbers that are run by the banks. But if you want to buy land through the commercial banks, like you need money. Minimum 40% of the amounts
Nthato,
required.
that sigh, I feel like that sigh is very discouraging. Even your body language was just defeated. And I think this probably even goes to people who are trying to buy land, to say to people, especially first-time home buyers who are living in urban areas, don't do it. Just buy a house. Don't commit to trying to buy land and build for yourself. It's very expensive. It will cost you more than just buying, a fully done house. If anything, rather tweak your house than wanting to build a house from scratch. So in terms of quick one, Nthato, top 2 tips in raising capital. I think because we both know there are different avenues to access funds, whether you tap into your own social capital, social network, approach banks, certainly put together an investor pack. But top 2 tips for people who are looking to find different creative ways of financing, not just the acquisition of the property, but also perhaps the actual construction of those units that they want to build.
Yeah, I think I would go for getting funding from the NEF. They have shown that they're more willing to give out funding now. So I'd say people may look into that. As for commercial banks and other things, I think they're used to it, so I won't even mention it. And then the second one would be, guys, raise money by yourselves. Stockfellas are killing it now. Just get together, raise the funds. If you do not have the means to do so, we've already created a platform, Wealth Creation Network. Just go to our website and check. We've raised R1 million in less than a year, and this was like 18 guys. So imagine when you have 100 people. So there are certain platforms that you can use. Raise the funds person, especially if you want the land. If you want land for 1 million, you must minimum have 500,000. Banks are not going to play with you. They're not in the business of owning land. Disposing of land is very hard. It's not like selling a house.
It's hard and it's expensive. And even, we've had banks come onto the show and consistently say that they part of the reason why you need to be, putting down such a big deposit is because they're not in the business of wanting to own that particular land. Once you sort of struggle to, raise the money for it, perhaps you can't pay anymore. So I think that's definitely something that viewers at home need to be aware of. And, Nthato, I wanted to tease you, but I think I won't. I think I've teased you enough today. I wanted to tease you about you saying that 18 guys, you guys got together as 18 guys and you're able to raise R1 million in a year. Part of me was like, I think 18 guys should have been able to raise more than that. Especially because I feel like I've seen some of your circles even on social media. You should be raising more than R1 million in one year, Nthato, especially as 18 of you. So I would challenge you to raise far more than that. That's not the example you should be sharing with us. We want bolder numbers than R1 million between 18 guys. But before I then let you go, because you've already even highlighted some of the really great risks that probably potentially come with the Kasi market. What tips would you then give for people who want to use their property ekhaya already, right? Because we've been talking quite a lot about those who may want to maybe build and be property entrepreneurs, but not everybody is trying to go that route, and certainly not everybody can go that route. So for those at home who have Indlu ekhaya, and there's obviously a bit of space in the back, and perhaps they might even have a second one, how can they also tap into this gap that they see emakaswabo and still be able to sort of provide quality accommodation? So I almost want to say a step up above a back room, where obviously, as you were saying, everybody shares a toilet ngaphandle, ne bathroom ngaphandle, or bageza kuvaskom. But how can they then elevate tips for them who are looking to do that with their back rooms?
Yeah, I'd say there's an approach that people are using now quite frequently. If you have the funds, you have the money, the capital to invest into a bedroom, but you own nothing, you get together, you sign a contract, and you give the owner funds to build these bedrooms, and then you guys share the profits. It's quite risky. It needs someone who understands the law, get lawyers, like the contracts should be crazy, but mostly it's done by people in the townships, and they even do it verbal agreements. Anyway, that's a story for another day. But that's the approach that people are using, and it's quite working for them because you want to invest, but you don't have a house, and you don't even want to buy that house. It makes your capital a lot. And what I would say is, if your stand is big enough, try to have different entrances for your tenants and yourself. It gives them a sense of belonging. It gives them a sense of, I have my own place. You're not in their face every day. So you do that first. Secondly, make sure that you build rooms with ensuite bathrooms. Guys, the time of going outside is over. Please, you will attract quality tenants, people who are working, people who are even willing to pay more. Instead of squashing 4 rooms in there, build 2 rooms with a kitchen inside, with a bathroom, and then you can charge it. There are people paying 3.5 in Soweto in a bedroom, because when you get inside, you feel like I'm in Randburg here, I'm in a suburb. So try to do that, move a step up, and you will be fine. That's where the market is going anyway. These ones that are dilapidating, guys, I'm giving you probably 10 years, you won't see them anymore. The big guys are coming into the townships anyway. They're buying 6 houses in a row, that's billions a zone, and then they build quality flats. There's lots of those popping up. So you must imagine that's your competition. The state is also your competition. The government social housing program, the rental is so cheap there, and the houses are quality, they are proper. There are those that are done by Josh Core in Deep Kloof. Someone pays rental 600 for a bachelor, that's proper, with running water, electricity, its own bathroom and kitchen. So that's the competition you are facing. The time is going out slowly but surely. So step up, otherwise you'll get left behind.
I love that. Step up or you will get left behind. And that's a great note to leave it at. Nthato, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Zama.
And that is Nthato Raboshaga, who is the founder at Nthato Realty. And that has been the Thursday edition of the Private Property Podcast with myself, Uzamantungwa Khumalo. We'll be back on your screen tomorrow evening as we wrap up Friday at 7 p.m. You can, of course, look forward to the Farming Podcast at 8 p.m. with award-winning farmer Umbali Nwogo at 8 p.m. Until then, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.